we're going to go on a journey on this one.
New Zealand can improve its performance and our people can get happier.
The topics, we talk about the suits that come in and talk to the government and influence their decisions. We talk about the democratization.
They decide to abuse their power and their access to government systems.
Of people's identity and being able to express themselves and feel valued, and how you scale that.
So the government went, well, what we have to do with tomorrow's schools is we have to teach people at the level that they are. Sounds great, doesn't it? You know?
We talk about recruitment, organisational management. We talk about unpacking values and vision.
Most organisations have their values on the wall, but they don't take them down and actually live them. If you keep making the same mistake when you know, well, then you're an idiot.
And we really highlight the challenges that come with trying to develop yourself in this world, the systems as they are.
People need to change their viewpoint on that, you know, because if you realise that you can't actually be wrong about something you didn't know before, I mean, that's just folly. Yeah, so you're actually wiser and more intelligent when you discover you didn't know something. And so it's cause for celebration. You know, it's like, oh.
This is a fascinating one. Polarizing. Interesting. So, enjoy. All right, we'll just jump into it, eh?
Okay.
We're good. So I have no idea where this podcast is going to go.
All right.
But I guess maybe starting, what are you doing? What are you doing with your life right now?
What am I doing with my life?
What brings you joy, or what's your profession? Or
I'm doing the same thing I've been doing with my life probably for 30 years now.
Yeah.
So I've got 37 years in human resources, and which morphed into human capital from HR. So human capital takes a person beyond just the employment relationship into how they behave at home when they go home and how they interact with people in society. So it's human behavior 360 degrees, multi-dimensionalized is human capital. I wanted to focus on fairness, and I wanted to move people focusing from bias and discrimination on grounds of personality into focusing people on actual ability to do things. And that's the behavioral approach. So started focusing on behavior in the early 90s. I had a couple of recruitment companies that specialized in behavioral approaches, and we applied that across the board. And so that's how people do what they do. You know.
I'm just smiling because off air, people, there's potential going to be controversy at some point in this podcast. We don't know when. Okay, so there's this recruitment component that you're doing. Mm-hmm. And then I guess you recognize that there was a hole in how it was being delivered or how it was serviced, like with organizations, or what led to the realization about human capital?
Well, it started when I was phoned up by a client and asked to discriminate on the grounds of somebody's race. They said they didn't want any of those types of people working in their company. And normally,
what types were they?
They didn't want any Māoris working in their company. So they said they didn't want this. And, you know, I'd been in HR for 7 years. I was very successful at it. And agencies were quite often used to give people what they wanted. But 6 weeks earlier, my first child had been born, and he was part Māori. And it was the first time I actually felt discrimination. And so I didn't want to do that, and the company told me I had to, and so I left and I formed my own company and started investigating ways to actually recruit people based on their ability rather than any bias.
Interesting. Oh, there's so many cans of worms. Beautiful. Yeah. What do you, like on the HR thing? Because I've never really had an HR department. It's like a dog or something. Like people pat it and then, oh, look, this is our HR people. And from what I've heard of people in corporate, it's like my friend, her mother was, looked like she was going to die of cancer. And they brought in this HR person after just being told by this one person, hey, we want you to stay, just take as long as you need. But then the next day they book an appointment with the HR person that's like this robotic, emotionless
Well, I have a controversial view on HR.
Oh, go on.
People probably.
More controversy. Let's start off with something.
Well, no, what I think is I think HR departments and organisations are tasked with mitigating risk for the organisation to be sued for any breaches to any laws that relate to employment. That's not what HR should be. HR should be about defining an organisation's values and what they stand for, and then cascading that through the organisation and rewarding people not just for what they did, but how they went about doing it and contributing to their culture. Most organisations have their values on the wall, but they don't take them down and actually live them. And so I went about developing and inventing a system that enabled you to take the values off the wall, define them in behavioural terms, and then provide all the supporting documentation to manage somebody against that, so that when people are performance reviewed against their job, their performance reviewed against something they agreed to and that they understood and that they saw was necessary and in alignment. To do that in an organisation, it's an administrative nightmare. I mean, if you're going to recruit for values, you need to know how to identify those values in a person and predict whether they're going to exhibit those in your organisation, or whether they have behaviours, even like a behaviour to learn. Some people don't have a learning behaviour. They don't know how to learn. They've got blocks from past experiences that, push back against them. And, we have in our education system some very basic ways of learning. We have pedagogies, which a pedagogy is a way of learning. So we have the basic ones. You might have heard of them, like the audio one, where people learn from listening. We have the visual one, where people learn from seeing. We have the kinesthetic one, where people have their feelings acknowledged and share and talk about those things and move through into thought. They're the basic. We have about 4 that we basically use, but the Queensland Education Board did a study into it, and they identified about 24 different learning pedagogies. So the people learn in different ways, but our current system doesn't actually, it's not needs-based for learning. It's, it's sink or swim based.
There's so many things to unpack there, because one, like, I like the analogy of the education's a tree, and you got a dolphin, you got an elephant, you got a cheetah, you got a chimpanzee, and you climb the tree, and that's how you measure your success. When the dolphin, it might not have been a fair race. But then the other thing you talked about was actually defining values in a systemized way, which I've never heard of, because I've only ever helped up to 15 staff, which you can just talk to them. Systemizing, no idea. So how do you systemize core values?
This is it. You see, businesses are run by systems, not people. Yeah. And if they don't have a system, once they get up to about 20 or 25 people, it usually falls over. So it makes it very difficult for a small to medium-sized enterprise to actually break into the big things, because they've got people running the business. And that means a way of managing might be one way a manager manages, but then you'll have another manager in the company and they'll manage differently, and another manager managing differently again. And so suddenly you have, 3 or 4 theories and practices in managing. And that then makes the people in the organization who report to a poor manager, on the left foot, because they don't get the same opportunities for empowerment or development. And the organisation itself doesn't get a good return on its investment in its human capital, because they're not actually managing their resources that well. Whereas if the managers had a consistent way of managing and a consistent theory and practice, then you could get consistency across the organisation, and everyone gets a fair shot because they're actually managed consistently in a way the same way.
It's a bit of an art, because like I acknowledge I have so many biases. Like someone will blink at me twice and I'll be like, you remind me of Barry from fucking 1996. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then you think of this staff member's doing this, and then you might feel they might sway you and be like, oh, this is my struggle. And you're like, oh, I'll pay you more, instead of making it like a systemized, fair approach based on competency. So how does that work? Like, let's get in the nitty gritty. Like, how the fuck can you systemize core values?
Let's get in the nitty gritty and understand the product that we're dealing with, and the product is a person, basically. Yeah. And so I like to think of it this way. If you want to play with me for a minute, and the people listening can play along as well. Yeah. So I just want you to imagine a tree.
Okay.
Yeah. Any tree. Yeah. Think about that tree. Think about where it's standing and how tall it is, and what its leaf structures are like. I mean, does the tree even have leaves?
It has leaves, yeah.
What is the bark like on the tree? And, is it smooth? What's the root structure like? How far out do those roots extend under the ground? And what's the weather like around that tree? Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask you what your tree is like?
You can ask me what you want.
Yeah?
Fuck. Yeah.
What's your tree like?
So it's I don't know what they're called, but like it's this big trunk with like bark that's like sort of gritty.
Mm-hmm.
Like you pull it away and it sort of falls off, and then you've got a huge root system, goes out, and big like green leafy leaves, and like it sun shines out, and it's just like where you'd sit under and read a book.
Yeah. Okay. Now, if I ask somebody else what their tree's like, and I bet none of the listeners had your tree. Yeah?
Yeah, let us know.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is that I use the same words. Yeah? And yet you had your own tree, and each of your listeners did. So you can see that irrespective of whether you even defined your values or not, the interpretation of those values is going to be interpreted your way. Just like when you blinked, that person blinks at you and they reminded you of Joe Bloggs or whoever, yeah? So language is very inefficient, quite inefficient as a way of describing things. And like you talked about a dolphin before, well, when dolphins go out, they send out a sonar message, and then they send out another one, and it hits the other sonar message rebounding back that they'd sent out, and it actually translates into a three-dimensional picture. And they go, oh, okay, beach over there, trawler over there, school of fish over there. Yeah. And then when they go out to another dolphin, they don't actually describe that in their tree. They actually give the interference pattern that they just got back to the other dolphin, and they see it exactly as it is, without any interpretation. Yeah. So quite a highly sophisticated method of communication compared to us. Yeah, whereas we actually intellectualize and describe things, and some of us understand words better than others, and quite often many people use words that aren't appropriate even for what they're using them for, and they might have poor diction, and that even makes it worse. Yeah, so you can't measure anything unless you've defined it, and that includes like a value or a definition or an understanding of that. So getting things on the same page so that people understand them is what part of having a values-based thing is about. It's so that people actually can describe and understand what things are. Yeah. Back in the late 90s, I was working with an organization that had asked us to massage about 18,000 employees' performance reviews to assist them in a restructure. And when we started looking at all of this performance data, we came to the realization that about 4,000 managers had created this data on these people. And yet when you looked at leadership, one manager thought it was empowering people, another one thought it was controlling them, another thought it was about delegation, another, and so on and so forth. So even the intellectualizations of the meanings of the word leadership were so vast that it made the information in the performance reviews useless, because we had all these different views on what the same thing was. So, you can study what a banana tastes like, but you really have to eat the banana to know. And it's the same with values work. People actually have to do it and experience it to understand it.
Yeah.
We get our cars serviced, but do we service our people in the organisation? And yet they're our biggest expense, right? And yet we don't. And then there's this expectation that they understood my tree. They knew exactly what my tree was, and they didn't do what they were told. And yet it doesn't necessarily mean that to them,
That's interesting because, my approach is sort of like if there's a failing on the side, like naturally my insecurity would be like, oh, it's all their fault, blame them. But then when I intellectualize and think about it, I'm like, okay, everything's my responsibility. How did I contribute to where that point is? Either hiring or training or developing. It's interesting on the core values and how you talked about the interpretation of a word. Like even there was a study they did with eyewitnesses, and they're like, the social group would influence what the actual eyewitness saw, and they would say, oh, it was a green shirt. What they saw was a red shirt, and they're influenced by that person or by that group.
Yeah, well, it goes a bit. It's more of a systemic issue. Yeah, it's the method of education and things that we've been using. We educate people that there's a painful consequence for getting things wrong. And so the problem is these people grow up, whether it's a smack from mum, a detention at school, humiliation from their friends, or whatever the consequences for getting something wrong, for not sticking with the group or complying to it. And so then these people grow up and they go into work, and people are more concerned about not being wrong than understanding what somebody else is talking about. I mean, think about one of these 16 people you talked about that you employed before. Yeah? If you went to talk to them about performance in their job, how much time do you have to spend first trying to get your point across without them continuing to try and tell you why they did what they did? And there's this huge focus on not being wrong as opposed to learning what's important. And it's all because of this subconscious fear that there's going to be this painful consequence for being wrong. And so the way in which we develop and learn and the way in which we develop others and help them learn needs to be looked at. It needs to be changed. It needs to be something that is far more participative and accepting.
Interesting. So on that, if you had all the money in the world and unlimited resources, how would you change the education system? And just to push back on one thing was, I agree, the systematic contribution to the fear of consequence would play a part. I also believe that status is a huge component of humans, partly why we can see the white eyes, so we can interpret emotions. So we might, irrespective of that system, still be fearful of the consequence of social failings. But yeah, what would you do on education system?
Oh, we're talking about New Zealand's one.
Whatever the fuck you want. You're a dictator of the world.
Well, first I would look at top down.
Okay.
So at the moment in New Zealand, we have a terrible problem with our education system. We have moved to tomorrow's schools, which some people will trumpet as a great success, but it isn't a great success. They moved from... in the 80s, they had this way of teaching, which was, okay, everybody, we're going to do lesson 15, page 4, exercise 3. And everybody opened their books in class and everybody learnt it. And that was the way it was done. And of course, there were lots that couldn't learn in that system. So the government went, well, what we have to do with tomorrow's schools is we have to teach people at the level that they are. Sounds great, doesn't it? Do you know the differences in the behaviours required from a teacher to suddenly go from a dictatorial approach of open your textbook on this page to go to this lesson to do this, right?
Yeah.
And people left the teaching profession in droves because they didn't have the behaviours necessary to run multiple classes in the same classroom at the same time, which required different teaching skills. And in their infinite wisdom, they also decided to deregulate teacher training at the same time. So they put it out to about 16 different places could teach people to become teachers, not just the teachers' colleges that they had. So not only did they change the necessary requirement to identify the teachers that had the behaviours that would make them successful in teaching this new way of delivering a curriculum, but they deregulated all the expertise of training teachers as well at the same time. So New Zealand lost all its teachers. They got stressed out and left. Yeah. At the same time they did this, they decided to put out some aspirational standards for teachers to achieve how they're to be. But they didn't have a consistent theory and practice across all the schools. So they had over 4,000 principals deciding what involvement of whānau meant, for example, in a standard, in a framework of standard for the teachers. So some schools thought that meant you could have parents sitting in the classroom and they could participate with their children. Others meant it wrote a newsletter home to the parents, and so on and so forth. So if a teacher left one school and went to another school, they were at the mercy of that principal and assistant principal of that school. It's been a real stuff up and it's a real mess. So we've got these people, monkey see, monkey do, arguing, feeling uncomfortable and dissatisfied in the way that they're managed and not appreciated in their jobs, trying to teach our children how to feel appreciated and successful in learning. Right? It's not a good, it's nonsensical. It's ridiculous. So if I was to start, I would start on how teachers are managed and performance managed in schools. You know, at the same time, they went and put all these boards of directors in there where they had, mums at home and all sorts of people that wanted to keep busy go on boards to try and manage these teachers who were a law unto themselves because they're not teachers and they don't know. And quite often the schools have been run by the principal with a yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir board of directors. Yeah.
I don't know any of this, so you get fired up there. Like. Okay, so better, a better structure and process for helping the key people be better leaders, effectively, better coaches and supporting the kids. Yeah,
well, it's about people function really well when they understand. Yeah? They know, Like you put a person under stress, they want to be told what to do. You take stress away, people like to make their own decisions. Yeah.
Oh, well, there's something you can unpack that, eh? About the use of fear in government policy. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. It's the same thing. It's about diverting attention. Yeah. Whenever there's a major thing go down, look for the secret. Look what's going on elsewhere. What's the diversion? What's really going on?
Any diversions you've come across lately?
Lots.
I don't know. You can go wherever the fuck you want. It's up to you.
Yeah, I'm sure I could. But no, people want to know what to do, and so anyway, when I started looking into this behavioural approach in recruitment, I then started looking at performance managing people against behaviour, and ways in which could really inspire and uplift people to go beyond where they thought was possible in their job, and this morphed into how the impacts that this sort of way of being managed affected them at home and in their personal lives as well. And it was astounding how impactful working with people behaviourally in an organisation was, and the impact that it had on their lives and at home. And that enabled me to widen the system out and start looking at its use in schools, in personal relationships, in your own life. I mean, people don't often have the time to work on themselves. they work in themselves, busy in their life doing things, but to actually step back and look at maybe what their goals are, what's even important to them, even learning how to step back from oneself and look at what you've been doing and where you're at, and to do some sort of assessment on your own life and make a choice about something. Like, people find it impossible to make choices sometimes. Yeah. They don't know how to. Yeah. They just want to make sure that they're not going to be wrong, right? And so they become compliant and then dissatisfied.
There's so many so many people, I think, of like the average life of the average person, in the sense of they go to a job they hate, they have meaningless connections and relationships because no one actually truly knows who they are, and then they go out on a night out to medicate that pain just to start again on Monday. And you just think about that fear of change, or that fear of acknowledgement of an emotion, or to be introspective of themselves, lives a meaningless existence. And I think about, because that's what drives me, is to give every person the opportunity to live a fulfilling life. And I was tossing up between parenting from the ages of 0 to 3, because that's when a lot of the identity is, shaped and defined, or businesses, because businesses, you spend a third of your life there. So if you can create a safe, inclusive space where people can express themselves and do fulfilling work, then you could have a meaningful contribution to their life. So what do you think is stopping people from doing that introspection, to reflecting and facing the gargoyles of their mind?
I think mainly they just don't know how to. And a really interesting thing about not knowing something is that it flips them into thinking that they're wrong. Yeah. And people need to change their viewpoint on that. Because if you realize that you can't actually be wrong about something you didn't know before, I mean, that's just folly. Yeah. So you're actually wiser and more intelligent when you discover you didn't know something. And so it's cause for celebration. It's like, oh, right. Okay, I know this. I mean, if you keep making the same mistake when then you're an idiot. But you can't be wrong for not knowing something. And this is how learning has to change. Learning has to be about growing and developing and celebrating even being wrong, because it means you're wiser and more intelligent finding out something you didn't know before. So that systemic, foundational, infrastructural problem we have about the method and way that we teach and learn is what needs to be addressed. And, the current way that we're structured and the current way that we do things is only making it worse.
There's quite it makes a lot of sense from a framing standpoint. You're like, I'm not dumb, or I didn't make a mistake. I just didn't know, and that's a great thing. Now I know more.
That's
because
right.
I asked. How do you? So you think of, there's business owners. They're under stress. They're thinking financially. They have degrees of separation. So they're not that empathetic to the plight of the person on the on the front, so to speak. How do you make more of a conscious effort, or create a systemized way of encouraging the exploration of knowledge and truth?
So if you're looking at it from a business's standpoint, or somebody who owns a business, and because what you were talking about, what a business does, it isn't actually the business doing that, it's the individual employed in the business doing that. The problem we have a lot of the time is that our businesses are run by, in New Zealand, predominantly small to medium-sized businesses. And these individuals that run the business run it from one single entity of themselves. Yeah. Whereas it shouldn't be, right? They should have their hat on as an executive in the business, and then they put their hat on as a director in the business. Now, directors work on businesses, not in them. They look at structure, governance, systems, processes, mitigation of risk, and legal compliance. The people in the business work doing the business, yeah? And then there's another one, it's the shareholder. It's the person deciding whether they do that. And then there's the person who owns those shares, that is the director, and that works in the business. And that person is not either of those three things, yeah? That's Ryan, right? And he has his own goals and his own things, because predominantly you only own a business to sell it, right? It's an entity that you create with systems, processes, and things in it so that it is sellable. And then people can pick it up and follow those systems and carry it on. Businesses don't have good resale value when they were lifestyle businesses, and the people that owned them ran it as if they were the business. And we call them limited liability companies for a reason, because they're not the person. Yeah, and yet they run them as if they are, right? And that's the thing. So it's just a learning. Yeah. Now the system that I've developed that is an online system which enables people to create all of those defined things with different goals and descriptions and behaviors, and they learn how to do this. And it gives them space. Yeah, it enables them to widen back and realize they're not the being they're being, or they're not even the company if they're being that. Yeah, and there's something far more magnificent that can actually see all of those things as art pieces. Like they're going to go work on that piece of clay, and then they're going to go work on that one, And if they mold it right, they can sell it and get a profit. If they get really good at making it, they can duplicate them. Maybe franchise them, open other branches. I don't know. But they're not it. Yeah?
Yeah.
And it's learning that. But sometimes people are so in themselves, they can't even see themselves. They're only their thoughts.
Yeah, I see. So I call a lot of like either medium or one-man bands. I don't really go corporate because I don't really fit in with corporate. And there seems to be like a limiting belief for the one-man bands, which is around the delegation or the trusting of others, or the inability to learn, to an ego. Which, I have all these things at different times. And then you get to that mid-size component, which, you talk about systems and processes and not it being driven by the person in the front. I'm just curious if we could go in depth on like an example of how you might apply your system in an organization. You could ask me questions and I could either be the business or pretend to be it, or you could just use a specific thing that you've got if you want, because I just find if you...
Well, I think you is the perfect example.
Okay, all right, let's do me.
Yeah, but I don't know what we're doing with you. What are you doing? What is your business?
Well, essentially, it's I grow service companies using video, and the only thing they need to handle is the recording once a month, 60 minutes, and then turning up to the sales calls that we book.
Yeah. But what is your business?
What is it?
Yeah, what do you do?
What do I do?
Yeah.
Record videos with people and put it in social media and then call those leads and book the appointments.
So you're a video production company?
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Uh-huh.
It's changed a few times. You see my LinkedIn. This is good. Practice. As of Sunday, this is what it's doing. Yeah.
But you're very much that, aren't you?
What?
The video production company.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I think my biggest talent is helping people feel comfortable to express their true thoughts in a way people want to watch.
Okay. So now you're talking about how you do your business.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is not your business.
Okay.
It's your life, isn't it?
Bail me
and
up.
how you... I'm not bailing
but you're welcome
you up.
to if you wanted to.
Why would I bail you up?
I don't know. It makes for good content.
I don't know. Right? It's your life. I mean, I don't know what you want with your life. I mean, can I ask you a couple of questions about you?
Whatever you want.
Okay, so what's your name?
Ryan.
Ryan. And what do you teach people, Ryan?
How to live fulfilling lives.
How do you do that?
I ask questions about themselves that will help alleviate what's holding them back.
And why do you do that?
Because it gives me satisfaction to help Well, essentially, it comes from being abandoned as a child and getting value from helping people. So it's harder to get rid of me if I'm valuable.
Okay. So how you do that is you make yourself
indispensable.
Indispensable.
And also, I struggled with my own mind, so I like to help people with theirs.
Okay. So...
Is that where it's meant to go?
Sure. Well, I don't know. I have no idea. There is no meant to go, right? It's your tree.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? And it can be as pretty as you like or as fungus ridden as you like as well. I mean, it's entirely up to you.
Yeah.
But yeah. So how do you know you've been successful doing that?
I guess they take a positive step in their life and you see a noticeable change in how they approach things would be the measure. I don't necessarily need to achieve giving everyone the opportunity of fulfilling life. I just like the pursuit of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if it's the individual, it would be seeing, hey, they had this limiting belief and now they've taken a positive step to rectify that limiting belief.
Wow. Right down to a belief.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I love it,
Yeah. Well, I mean, you experience what you believe, unless you believe you don't, in which case you won't, which means that you did. So having a belief around it, it's really important. Yeah.
So I started the marketing company just to reach more people, just so I know how to do it. That's why it's been sort of all over the place, but I've never changed what I wanted to do.
Right.
Just the vehicle's been a bit fucking rocky.
Left to.
That's why I did finance too, because money's an important part of fulfilling life. So I just learned that to be an advisor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I use that process just for people to understand their life purpose.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I've got that.
Yeah, you got your purpose. Whether a business is the appropriate vehicle for you, I don't know, unless you're diversifying and letting people, go further with this work that you do. One might wonder if you wanted to be a, counselor or...
Yeah, I mean, that's limited to 20 people a week. And I enjoy it, but I just feel like I'm not doing anything really worthwhile. In terms of this, if I understand how to reach a large amount of people, the next thing is to create a scalable way to help people live fulfilling lives.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll make it a business for sure.
Nice. Yeah. So you have a business plan?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Okay, do you have your own goals?
Nah, I don't really get any satisfaction out of goals. I like the vision. I'm just like, how am I working towards that? I've got core values that I live by, and that's...
You've defined those?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Responsibility, authenticity, and empathy.
So what's responsibility? What does that look like?
Taking responsibility for your actions. What that looks like is if there's a mistake where it's easy to blame a client for, when in actual fact it's the process of you taking responsibility first before blaming others. Mm-hmm. So in the instance of a client, if we fuck up, we got to tell it and we take it on the chin. That would be...
Yeah. Some people might call it integrity.
Yep.
Depends. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what I was thinking in my head. You're like, that leadership thing goes 10 different ways, and like, how am I defining it? So yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So defining it. So far we've got responsibility as own your fuck ups.
Yep.
Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah.
Now you were proactive with owning it too, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't just say it, do it. Yeah.
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 So when something goes wrong, what do you do?
You think about, how did I contribute to this going wrong?
Do you timeline it or something?
Well, like in terms of 2 days, or I don't understand. What do you mean timeline?
Well, there's a chronology of events that led up to something going wrong. Like, do you go through the timeline and look at what you could have done at a different time in that chronology of events? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so from when the outcome that was unfavorable happened, thinking back on how you contributed to that.
Mm-hmm.
And just using that as the first point of call is like, how can I take responsibility for this?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say you see that and try and look for...
Has there ever been a time where you've done that there was something that the other party did that.
Yeah, so the
and then you took responsibility for their thing, even though it was theirs?
No. So it has happened.
Yeah.
What I would say is it's a combination of boundaries. So you being clear on if they have mucked up, you still, they're still accountable to their mistake.
Mm-hmm.
You're just seeking to see how you contributed to that mistake. Either it's a miscommunication, either it's, you didn't hire the right person, you didn't train them the right way.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're still accountable.
Mm-hmm.
You don't take responsibility for things that aren't your fault.
You just have a continuous learning methodology applied to what you do.
Yeah, just always. Essentially, what it is I tend to play victim and blame others is my default.
Yeah.
And so to counteract that, I err on the side of extreme ownership, and like to surround myself with people that take responsibility. So,
sucker for punishment.
Sucker for punishment. Very resilient. Yeah. Yeah.
So, how do you find people that share that behaviour or value, as you call it? Because that value is made up of many behaviours. It includes, some initiative, some personal organisation, because you've got to be organised and structured for yourself to even look back at yourself and how you did that and why you did that. There's some initiative. Yeah. There's some rapport with others, because you're going to have to chat to people, communicate with them. You're going to have good listening skills as well to even identify what went wrong, to review that and do that. So those values probably define about 10 or so different behaviours as well to actually be that value.
Yeah.
How do you look for people with that value and with those behaviours to work for you so that they're aligned to you?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is acknowledging that it's a rare thing and that it takes time as well. So in terms of how I hire that is, there's certain scenarios I'll be like, what would you do in this? It would be an example of what's actually happened in the business.
Yep.
Then it'd also be them in the implementation of it. So when they become a staff member, you can also consume their content and how they deal, and is the content related to, blame the government, blaming that, But it's just acknowledging that they're on a journey, and you're helping support them take more responsibility, and you do that through me being an example of it.
Yeah, but how do you choose a person to work for you that's going to be aligned with you in those ways?
Yeah, it would be quite abstract. Essentially, it would be vibe and asking questions about their life and how they dealt with certain scenarios.
Okay. So it's hit and miss.
Can be hit and miss for sure.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know.
No. So the system I've invented does that for you. You define things in the system, and it's like an automatic autonomy system in that it creates dynamically the forms and systems in alignment to that. And what's even more important is that when you get to performance managing people, or we like to call it development now. I think they call it learning and development, not performance management.
Okay,
evidently people have a resistance to the word, and it creates a block in their learning. But what you do is you make the job relevant to them. Yeah. Now at the moment, if you go to any companies, pretty much all of them, and you do a performance review, they'll give the same performance review to everyone across the organisation, except for maybe some few key performance indicators or KPIs that relate to their job that they'll manage them around. All goes well for the first one, yeah, but after that the people kind of go, what on earth's going on here? Why? This is just bullshit, right? And they start to disengage, yeah, and the managers themselves, the biggest problem with managers in any country of the world is that they have this secret going on that they think they're a bit of a fraud, right? Because people aren't really taught how to manage, and they do the best they can. Probably the best manager they've ever had, they'll replicate how they were spoken to and dealt with, or maybe the best teacher at school or the best leader they had as the captain of their team that they played in, or or whatever, or who they just read about and go, oh, Richard Branson, he's amazing, I'll do what he says in his book, or anybody else, yeah? So getting those things, what's really important is that people feel acknowledged and valued and that it's relevant to them.
Yeah.
Now, to actually do that in an organization is really hard. It's administratively cumbersome, and it requires updating things all the time. I mean, if a strategic goal in an organization changes, then so do the job descriptions to turn the behaviors of the people toward the new thing. And that means the way that you recruit for that position changes, the way that you reference check and do contrary evidence against that person's behaviors in previous jobs to validate your interview assessment. That has to change. The performance review changes. Yeah, the development programs change. The system I've created changes it all in real time, just straight away.
Boom.
Yeah.
That was a good speech, that one.
Yeah,
and it was tailored to my problem too. You'd be good at sales, though.
I was.
Yeah. And then the bomb and the...
I hated sales. I got headhunted from a bank. I was working at a bank, and I had these people come in every week and phone me every week for 3 months to try and get me to come and sell life insurance. And I was never going to do sales, I left in the end the bank and went and did that sales job. And then I won. And then I went and I worked for one of the world's largest recruitment companies, and I was top in the world for them. And I was very good at sales, but all I did was give people what they wanted. Sales isn't about giving people what they don't want. It's about actually identifying what they need and giving them that.
Yeah, we did that. You did an inquiry on me and then highlighted just me stumbling through things. I was like, shit, I have a problem.
Well, you asked how would it apply to me, and I started looking at, well, what's important to you? Well, first you defined the value of responsibility, which incorporated many things, but it basically said, do it now, and don't shy away from it and own it.
Yeah, I mean,
that was what it meant to me.
Yeah, I mean, you highlighted a lot of problems essentially, and how I approach and no, it's good though. I like learning. Yeah. So it's like highlighted.
You're
there's
wiser now.
Huh?
You're wiser now.
Every person I meet, I learn something. Might be not what to do sometimes, but so like I think about I didn't have a clear approach and system to attract a certain type of person. My values weren't necessarily clearly defined because there's so many offshoots around what that value is and how it looks and how
every single employment problem can be traced back to the recruitment. So whether you defined the job, whether you actually, because quite often people when they do a recruitment, they just replace somebody, right? They forget that every time somebody resigns is a wonderful opportunity for the business to relook at its strategy, its goals and what it's doing, look at a skill matrix or behavioral matrix across the organization of what's required to achieve what the organization's setting out to do, look for the gaps in their existing workforce, and then find what they need to bring in to complement what they have in their organization again, and bring in that new energy and skill set and behaviors to help them achieve their goals. Usually what happens is the businesses are freaked out that someone's leaving. The manager is scared that they're being blamed for being a useless manager and that's why they're left. So quickly, let's hide the problem as quick as we can and we'll hire someone in and throw them in and just hope like hell this one doesn't fuck up. Yeah. Whereas it's the other way around. You get a job vacancy in your organization, celebrate. This is an opportunity to go back and, hit the ground running again with a clear path. So, and somebody leaves an organization, exit interview them, get them independently interviewed when leaving and find out all the reasons that they're leaving and find out, because if your manager is the cause of your people leaving, they're costing you an awful lot of money because retraining, bringing people in, the downtime, the different contacts that your customers deal with in the business perhaps is changing. All these things have an impact and could, shrink your client list. So having a good look at it in a different way is looking at things as opportunities. But once again, there's systems that have to be in the place for organizations to do this. And there aren't systems. Their managers are their systems in managing predominantly. They might give them some forms, but they don't even teach them how to use them. And the forms are so obligatory that they're not even any good because they're not relevant to people. And the minute people start seeing the irrelevance to a system, they'll start playing the system in the way that they think they can manipulate it to just pass through without drawing any attention to themselves, and the company's losing money on this. And it's crazy the amount of money that's spent on wages. It's usually a company's biggest expense, and yet it's the least invested in for development. And you look at some of the companies in New Zealand that used to stand out in training, like the Fisher and Paykel's. They used to put 8% of their budget in training. You don't get anything like that in SMEs or anywhere else. And usually somebody's got a problem, flick them on a training course. There's not even any relevance to the training course or any relevance to the behaviours that perhaps caused the problem in the first place. And what's the point in sending someone on a training course if they don't have behaviours to learn, or that pedagogy of learning in that training is going to be something that works for them, that they can learn from? Because a lot of the time people have so much attention in training on their own competence and on their view of what others are thinking of them, they don't have a spare attention particle to learn something new. It's not available to them. So looking at that holistically is really important, because there's been a lot of surveys, money, all these sorts of things, but actually feeling valued and heard is worth more than money, status, position, or anything else. So learning to do this is a really important thing. But, you have to get beside somebody to do that,
Yeah. Wow. This is interesting. Definitely interesting chat. We've done 51 minutes and we haven't hit the controversy yet. You've made some great points. I mean, cause I believe in life you should front foot things, because if someone's out there saying something, at least you've got a vehicle now to be like, you know what, listen here. And I don't know anything about it. Whether you can talk about it or not talk about it. Firstly, I think it's quite useful to, lead into it. So what is the thing you warned me of on the call?
Well, I just talked about the fact that, like what I've spoken to you about empowering people from school up and empowering them in the workforce and everywhere else. They're really, really important things. And a lot of people grow up in our societies believing that's not the life for them. I mean, how is it that some people have money and others don't? How is it that some people can run a business and others can't? Like we have the power in a few, and where's the wealth in the world? What's happening? And why does this happen? Right? Is it the system? Like, is it the system and the way the system is done? Well, I believe it is. I believe infrastructurally we have the wrong type of system to educate and develop people. And it needs to be a level playing field, because this small few who control everything, they know the laws and they use them, right? And how expensive is it to go to court? If you can't even afford some time to work on yourself and do your goals in your life because it's not available to you, how on earth are you going to have time to even consider that you could be more than what you currently are now? And what's out there to help you do that? There's actually nothing, is there? Nothing at all.
No, it's all self-driven.
Everything. Yeah. So we have a responsibility to help humanity and everybody in it. But for some reason, our governments aren't even structured in a way to even consider such a thing. I mean, I did a proposal regarding this system to our last Prime Minister before she left, as an example.
Are you a fan?
Am I a fan? Don't get controversial.
Oh, me. Yeah, you can. Yeah, go on.
And they under an OIA, an Official Information Act request, apologised because they turned down the proposal. And when I asked under an OIA how they came to a decision to refer me to the Government Electronic Tender Service for a new invention about how, we could help New Zealand's intellectual capital, they told me I had to go and put my proposal through GETS, the Government Electronic Tender Service. But you have to have a tender to apply for to do that. So after this back and forth over several months, they came back and said, yes, they were very sorry. It was wrong for them to refer it there. But they still won't consider the proposal. So how, if you can't get politicians to consider a proposal to change the way our government's structured to look at it, how can you even do it? You can't. It's set up for the way it's done currently. And the way it's done currently means New Zealand's not a sovereign nation. It doesn't operate and make its own decisions and choices.
Yeah, what makes it that?
Well, because we can't change anything.
Oh, okay.
It's all in the structure of the way it's all established.
Oh, yeah, got you.
With the laws.
Yeah. So
right.
Like the inertia of just staying as is, so we can't make decisions because it's just gonna. And it's like cherries on top of the ice cream. You can't change.
And is there any difference between red and blue?
Potato. Are you saying it's the suits people come in and be like,
Well, I'm just wondering who the puppeteer is above all of them.
Who do you think? World Economic Forum? BlackRock?
Klaus Schwab? I have no idea. All I know is it's not here.
Yeah.
Yeah? And there's some very interesting things that are about to come out, which I think, we've had a lot of people in our politics that have basically been treasonous without a word of a lie.
Treasonous people being influenced by someone. But where's your controversy? Because you did the proposal, they didn't want it, which isn't too crazy. Huh?
Maybe they're blackmailed.
Oh, yeah, it wouldn't be hard.
Yeah.
Like even appealing to people's self-interest isn't that, challenging. You understand them a little bit, you align it with their identity, and then, now they're doing something, and you incrementally do it with compliance later, so they do small things, and then they're too far down, now they do bad things. Wouldn't be that hard.
Let's put it this way, Ryan. These... I've offered this system hoping that the government would be interested because they have the infrastructure and systems enable it to be disseminated and make it available to people easily and quickly using the current structure. Talk about bang your head against a brick wall.
Oh, yeah, no.
It's more like a sledgehammer coming at you. Because there seems to be this problem with enabling people to manage their own behavioral file, I thought we'd sell NFTs, share the revenues and the returns with people through buying an NFT, and make the system free for everybody. And that way, what is so important can actually get out there for people to use and see and learn how to. They can work on themselves, not in themselves. They can work on their businesses, not in them. They can work on their relationships. They can improve the level of happiness for themselves and those that are important to them. And they can go beyond where they ever thought possible and realize they're far more amazing than they ever thought they were.
Are you going to go a different tack? Obviously, the government's not the easiest to nurture. Are you going to go around them, go a different way?
Well, this is what the idea is about selling these NFTs.
Oh, yeah, so then it's publicly funded, like by people.
Yeah, and it becomes available.
Okay. So right? You've got this exchange, let's say Ethereum or whatever, and you're trading these NFTs, and because they're going to appreciate in value, that's a benefit for others, but then it means you don't have to charge for like an ongoing cost of having it. Is that kind of...
There's a couple of reasons. One of the reasons it's on the blockchain is because it can't be corrupted. So if you own your personnel file on the system, yeah, no one can put anything on there without you putting it on there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? So you can't get a bad employer giving you a shitty reference check because they don't like you and screwing up your life.
Mm.
They can't start saying you're this and that at work when you're not, because it's clear. See, at the moment, not only do people not follow due process or fair process, they then just follow fair process and still aren't fair. Yeah, I'm helping somebody at the moment who's got an employment dispute, only because it's a friend of a friend. And I mean, she was about to be done. And she's not even at fault. Because these guys never gave her a job description, never trained her for a role, and then decide to pull something on her because legally they're in trouble for something she did, which isn't even relevant because she was never trained to do it anyway. And the performance reviews she's had over the 10 years she's worked there, they've never given her any feedback on any of the performance reviews anyway. Right? But because they were following due process and having the meeting and telling her side, and she was giving her side, and they're following it all through, she was about to lose a job. Till I come along and just have a quick word to them, and suddenly it's all pulled. Yeah? Just because, well, this is the truth of it. Yeah, but people don't know. And it's not even those people in the business not really knowing, you know, because they're not taught either. Those managers weren't taught how to teach these people, right? But it's everybody just blaming everybody else. It's the culture, you know. It's like, we'll just blame it, push it there. This one, you know, that person's going to take the fall. You know, there's always someone taking a fall everywhere because that's how we do it. People take falls, they do. You know, and they don't have to. You know, people can actually work together to achieve something. And it's quite magnificent when they do, you know?
I agree. I don't know what your time constraint is. I have time. It's 2:00.
Yeah, I'm right.
So the social, and Ash, obviously. Ash is good. All right. So the social credit score. So the pushback you might have is you're giving this power to the government that can track in some degree of a person's personal identity and what they're doing and where they act.
No, that was not what I was doing.
Okay.
No, I went to the government for two reasons. One was it will give New Zealand a head start over every other country in the world, and I'm a Kiwi. I was born here. And the second reason was because they currently have enterprise schemes with local bodies. They have all the things all set up. So to be able to transfer this knowledge to them and give them all the tools, and then they could use their existing networks, was why it just made sense, right? However, New Zealand government does business with certain providers, and then they're providers, and then they get the door open to them wherever they like, and these providers do not like new providers coming in. These providers from overseas, these providers who provide other government services, they like to provide all the services here as well. They don't want anybody else to have that business. So if I refuse to join in partnership with them to do business, they decide to abuse their power and their access to government systems. So that is why I decided to do NFTs. Now, the NFTs enable Joe Blogs, anybody, to buy a non-fungible token, which basically is just like proof that they own this. That's basically what the NFT is. Yeah? And the NFT has utilities. And what utilities are basically the terms of the contract. Yeah? So an NFT in what we're doing, and it's the first one in the world, is where the NFT and the utility is basically a digital contract. And we're enabling the people who own that to get a share of revenues and a share of profit in some of them in the Transparent Democracy Systems application. So what that means is that instead of the system being made free to everybody and owned by the government and done so that New Zealand can improve its performance and our people can get happier and all of our social indexes improve, we thought we'd put some advertising on the side of the website, make money that way, and allow people to use the system for free. And it's the returns off that and some of the consulting that we wish to share with people. Because they don't want, and when I say they, I'm talking about the suppliers to government that have control of what's going on. It's really weird, we have a government which says we don't make decisions. We don't make decisions about transactional things in business. They're made by the ministries, but that's not really what happens at all, right? But it's done this way so that they can stay out of it. You need to ask some questions about this because I'm swimming around and it's starting to make me sound like an idiot.
I wouldn't say you sound like an idiot. The questions I would have would be, one would be like, okay, you've got this NFT, there's a revenue share. Is the revenue share around so you're advertising to the users because you've got all these people that are using this, so you can advertise and then they get a revenue share of their basic
every click through. Yeah.
So, yeah, as a financial advisor, I always worry about the underlying currency that it's supported because it's not in dollars. It's usually in some sort of underlying.
Well, no, you can go on to OpenSea and you can use your Visa card and pay with dollars and buy some Ethereum and purchase it.
Yeah, so the Ethereum, that transaction from dollars to Ethereum.
Yep.
Like if it was just stayed dollars. And there was another way to still have a blockchain without it being tied into a cryptocurrency, which I haven't really seen something done.
Yeah.
That's when I feel more comfortable because there's a lot of volatility, uncertainty. Ethereum goes under, maybe you swap it over to something else, but there's still that investor risk and that sort of greed mentality that I worry about,
Yeah.
So, but if it was I understand the smart contract component. I understand that the underlying thing is actually owned by the user. And I think there's real utility in that, and also social proof. Hey, I own this thing. I have the ticket from Woodstock. It's the original ticket. I can prove it. Well, that makes sense to me. As soon as it put onto a thing with variation on and appeals to greed, then I'm like, I don't like it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how it appeals to greed, or were you
the
going with that?
advertising, and then Ethereum potentially going up in price or going down in price.
Right.
So you put in $100, but then it's only worth $50. Or it goes up to 1,000, and it's like a gamble on what that will do. And then even though you have
there's a trading ban until the end of 2026 anyway, because it isn't about that.
Okay.
Right? And we have a trading ban on it because it's about us achieving what we wish to do rather than it becoming a tradable commodity. And the reason we've done this is so that it isn't interrupted. You see, there are many, many times I've had people approach wishing to invest lots of money in what I'm doing, but they wish to have A shares and they wish to have control of the company. This is about the human spirit and the development of the human spirit in people. This is about equality and real transparency and eliminating corruption. I don't want that screwed with. So for that reason, we've gone with NFTs so that the company can stay pure in its intent and what it's doing. Right? We don't want a BlackRock coming along and snipping us up and then throwing us out, because for them it suits the government to continue to spend an extra $5 billion a year on their software systems and programs than use my system, which will eliminate the use of them having to spend that $5 million, right? Or $5 billion, yeah? They wish to make it complicated. They don't wish people to have easy things. They wish to have problems and ups and downs and fear, and they wish to talk about what you were talking about as your financial hat on, where they want there to be risk. They want there to be unmanageable risk. They don't want people to be in control, right? They like to be in control, and they control it through how they manipulate everything else.
Interesting. Well, we are coming to a conclusion, which is a horrible. I'm trying to be more, less agreeable, shall we say, like more just speaking how I feel, and I like the idea of the underlying driver on helping people and empowering them and having clear systems and processes that do that. I do think there's a fundamental flaw in the way things are done currently. I can't get there with you on the NFT. So if you want to have the closing remark, the last word.
Well, the NFTs are not about trading in Ethereum. They're about owning a right to receive a return. Yeah. And those returns will be paid to your wallet and whatever you like. Right? You can have it cashed to your bank account for a week here. It doesn't bother us, right? This Ethereum thing and this NFT thing is not associated with the risks you're talking. This is not an art piece. This is the rights to returns from a trading company, which the NFT holders have the right to collectively vote for independent director representation on the board, so that they can be sure that there's good governance and that things are transparent. But it's not about trading in crypto. It's about having access to certain things on the blockchain so it cannot be corrupted, hacked into, or infiltrated. That's the purpose of it. Yeah, it's not about trading in cryptocurrencies. It's about protecting things and keeping them transparent. That's the idea of the blockchain.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on.
Okay.
Cool. I'll leave your website in the description too. Fine.
Thank you.